Hi everyone, my name's Mike and welcome to the video. This week we're back doing a classic bike review. In fact, we're doing two classic bikes. These are two bikes that are owned to Richard, who you'll be very familiar with on this channel. One is a recently acquired 1959 Model 18 AJS 500, which is a magnificent thing. And the other one is one he's had a little while, and that's a 250. It's a 1971 250 BSA Gold Star, which is like well, you've seen the pictures of it by now already. So we took them out for a ride around Shropshire. Some of the pictures that you see are at Slape Airfield, which is an ex-RAF airfield. And then we just had a nice ride round Shropshire, little town called Wem. So I hope you enjoy it. I'll talk about it more later and we'll do the normal roundtable chat. Yeah, thank you very much for watching the videos, and as always, if you like what we're doing, please give us a like and a subscribe, because it does make a big difference to us. And we've got plenty more coming up. In a couple of days' time we're off to the Prescott Hill Climb, where Stuart and Dave from the channel will be riding their bikes, taking their bikes up the hill. They're part of the hill climb, so I'll be covering the whole day on that, so watch out for that one. And with that, I'll stop waffling on, and as always, on with the show. It'll be good value.
Bit of decompressor. Does need tickling, Rich.
Maybe a half tickle, yeah.
Half tickle.
And there is a choke, but I wouldn't.
Very good. Okay, so now it's my turn to see if I can get it started.
Yeah, take it over, a tiny bit over compression.
Oh, first kick. Can't match that, Dave, can you? So we're in the little town of Wem in Shropshire. The gears are on the right hand side. First is up and the rest are down, so it's the opposite of what you're used to, but I'm fairly used to that changing between gear changes. Listen, because the head is a little bit loose, you get these incredible bangs but it sounds kind of charming. There's lovely engine now. Pop, pop, pop. Love it. But it's certainly no speed machine, but you don't really want it to be. It's just a joy to waft along. Once you get it into top gear, it's just a case of rolling the throttle on and off and just listen to it. There we are, in top. That fat engine sound is wonderful. And look at that big chronometric speedometer just ticking away. I think 50 mile an hour maybe we got up to, and it just feels right, absolutely right. That beautiful sound wafting along these Shropshire lanes. Look at the weather, it's beautiful, that fantastic sky. It's what you dream extreme about England. It's very rarely the case, with the weather that we get. But this is just, it could be 1959, apart from the modern cars, but the hedgerows, the roads. So what's it like to ride? It's lovely, absolutely lovely. The standout bit is the engine for me. It handles very well. Obviously it's a 1950s bike. The suspension's a little bit choppy, but it doesn't matter. It is what it is. But you can fling it around. It's certainly not difficult to ride. In fact, it's quite easy to ride. In fact, I turn it round here and I don't even miss a gear. I think I'll give it its head when I accelerate, so you can see the neck snapping acceleration. Here we go. Isn't that magnificent? Yeah, as I say in our chat later on, this to me feels very much like 1 foot in what would have been the pre-war bikes and 1 foot in more modern bikes. It feels very different to the Triumph Twins. It absolutely feels of its era, and quite scary really when you think something like this is vintage and performs like this, when you consider it's a 1959 bike and I was born in 1959, so I'm the equivalent of this bike. Oh, here we go. Hang on to your hats. I think I was just doing that I could have left it in top gear. I think I was just playing around with it to see what it would do. But the brakes seem to work alright. The brakes for a 50s bike, the brakes brake. The suspension bounces up and down as it should, and it's all about the engine. I can see why Richard's absolutely smitten by the charm of a period single cylinder bike, because the soft cams and just the fun of rolling it on and off top gear. Steady on, missus. I haven't got twin discs, Oh, I rode past these school kids and it backfired. I don't think I've got it on film, but they were looking around going, what on earth's that? It's like an alien spaceship to them. So here we are back in Wem. Disturbing the locals. So thank you, Rich. I had a great time on this bike. In fact, I would love this bike if you want to give it to me. Actually, I'm sure you do, seeing as it's my birth year and everything. So we'll have a go on the Red Devil next, I think. Okay, so come on, Mike, show us your starting technique. Unfortunately, not quite as successful as the first one. We lost that round badge off the tank. Oh, finally got it going. But listen to the difference. It's a lot more. It's not as soft and woofly. It's quite a high state of tune this bike. Still got that nice brrr when you roll the throttle off. It's a lot quieter, it hasn't got that backfiring and everything, but this is lovely to look at. It looks a lot more like it is. It looks like a late 60s 70s bike, you know, with the modern clock on it, but it's got a totally different sound. It's not exactly harsh, but it certainly hasn't got that woofly charm of the AJS. And it's probably about the same performance. I don't know, am I in top gear here? I think I must be. It's quite a busy bike to ride. It's not a relaxing ride. It's charming. It's got its charms. And they've got a lovely burble on the overrun. And in terms of handling and manoeuvrability, it's very lightweight. You can chuck it around. You can see why, like, the B50s or B40s did so well in off-road competition, because it is a very wieldy bike, but you can see it's quite revvy, and it's a totally different experience to the last bike we were riding. But it looks lovely. Look at the chrome headlight and the chrome bars. But it feels a million miles away from the likes of the RD or the RD250 or the Kawasaki KH250 of the era. They'd be in a different postal zone by the time you got this into third gear. So it doesn't really compete performance-wise, but it's a charming bike. It's an attractive bike. And the brake works really well. I think I mentioned I showed you that it's a hydraulic conversion on it. So the brake works well, the handling works well, suspension's good. So it's not a bike you'd ride distances on, but as a Sunday afternoon tearing around the place, lovely thing. So thank you again, Rich. Two beautiful bikes that you've got. Two singles, very different. Hi everyone, welcome to the video.
Hi.
Hi there.
We are out on a couple of Brit bikes today, and they're Richard's bikes, and I'm going to tell you all I know about them. One is an AJS 500cc Model 18, 1959, and the other one is a BSA 250 Gold Star,
B25
B25
SS 1971.
Alright, so tell us a bit about them, you two.
Well,
Rich, it's your bike.
starting with the BSA, that was a sort of last throw of the dice for BSA Triumph in terms of trying to keep singles going, where the market wanted twins and triples and fours.
Sorry about that.
So yeah, that B25 SS 1971, as I said, was right in the sort of death throes of B's Triumph, where they were trying to compete with the Japanese, and
Especially with the 250 specifically for the learner market,
absolutely,
weren't they?
Absolutely. So trying to compete with the Japanese, that 250 single, they had sort of upgraded it, and arguably it was in a high state of tune, which did draw some criticism at the time. It was 10:1 compression ratio, hot cam, and that's why this video is quite interesting, because it's in sharp contrast to your traditional 50s Brit single.
Yeah, so the 250 was in they were trying to compete with the likes of the XL250 Honda.
Well, the XL250 was probably a little bit later.
But all the Japanese 250s,
But-
YDS.
Yeah, but
whatever.
they're two-strokes.
I know,
aren't they?
but what I'm saying is the market was, if you
Yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
in the UK, just
Yeah.
to explain to our people not in the UK you could ride up to 250cc
Yeah.
on what was called a provisional license. You didn't have to take a test. So loads of us started out proper motorcycling after a moped or a super moped on a 250.
Yeah.
And you had all the Japanese manufacturers made something, G5, what was the Honda called? CB250.
CB250, yeah.
And, you know, and these are, you know, and they all did comfortably 80 mile an hour
Yeah,
or
yeah.
more. And these are, as Richard's saying, started out with something that can trace its lineage back
Gosh.
to, the Terrier.
Tiger Cub Terrier, yeah.
So that engine
Yeah.
is the Tiger Cub Terrier.
Yeah.
So that's where it
Yeah.
started.
That's where it started.
And they were a sloper single, weren't they? With that, it became
Yeah,
a
but
vertical single, and then it was the C12, the
C15.
C15.
Yeah.
So that is related to a C15.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't look anything like a C15.
Well-
It's got a square barrel.
Yes.
Yeah, they went to a square barrel quite late on,
Okay.
but nothing really changed.
Yeah.
You know, it was an alloy barrel, I think, with an iron liner, but nothing changed other than, as Richard's explaining, the cams got more fierce,
Yeah.
the compression got more fierce to try and give it, quote unquote, 90 mile an hour performance
Yeah.
ahead.
What I found was it felt quite harsh.
Yeah, brittle. You say.
Brittle is
Yeah.
a perfect word for it.
Yeah.
It certainly got up and went.
Yeah.
But for
And
what
once
it
you
is-
wound it up,
Yeah.
I mean, I've had, and we'll come on to the AJS soon, but both the AJS and the Beezer, considering the Beezer is only a 250, the AJS is a 500, ultimately their practical on-road performance is very, very similar.
Yes.
They'll both cruise comfortably at 55, 60.
So Rich, before we get into the comparison, it might be worth just giving a little bit of a pen picture on the AJS.
The AJS, yeah, that's a Model 8500, as you say, Mike, and a 1959. So coming to the end, because AJS Matchless went bankrupt in 66, 67, so come to the end. And that 59, it's quite a good year because it was only the second year where they fitted an alternator and coil ignition rather than the old dynamo and magneto.
And a
So it's a
different-
bit easier to live with.
Different gearbox. as
Yeah,
well.
it
And-
got the AMC gearbox,
Yeah.
which
Rather
is the
than
same
the
as
old
on a
Berman.
later Commando or whatever, or similar. very
I
similar.
only know this because I've been listening to these. two.
Yeah, the
I'm not that
Anoraks.
clever.
I'm no expert on it.
No,
I'm
the
no
Anoraks.
expert on it.
So actually, that one is
It's a good year.
comparatively easy to live with.
It's
And
lovely.
Ironically,
Yeah.
the early ones probably fetch stronger money. But
So-
as a riding bike, that's probably
so
better.
worth, just because we talked a little bit about the history of how we got to the B25. So AJS Matchless, AMC motorcycles as
Yeah.
they were, two separate companies amalgamated.
Yeah.
One
Back in the
Wolverhampton,
30s,
Wolverhampton and London based.
Yeah.
Their lineage is really into dispatch rider bikes from
Yeah.
the war.
World War
Matchless,
II, yeah, the Matchless
very
G3.
popular with the dispatch
So which
riders.
one was the Birmingham one? Matchless or
Well, it was
Wolverhampton.
Wolverhampton. Actually.
Wolverhampton? sorry.
AJS.
So
They
AJS
started
Stevens.
in 1909, I think, and then they were taken over by Matchless when they went bankrupt.
and
in
Matchless
31.
were Plumstead.
Plumstead.
That's it.
So
Yeah.
South London,
Yeah.
and and the reason the Matchless in the war, I think it was called a G3L, wasn't
Yeah,
it, or something
yeah.
like that, in the war was really popular with the dispatch riders, was it had good suspension.
Yes.
The forks in particular, Matchless's fabled telehydraulic forks, and they called telehydraulic for the rear shocks as well. But
Oh, okay.
anyway, they didn't have shocks in the war,
Yeah.
rear shocks. So and that's what evolved into Richard's bike, and it was a 350 and a 500. There were some differences, weren't there, Rich,
Yeah.
between the AJS and the Matchless? They were fairly subtle.
Yeah.
Like the magneto was behind the barrels on the Matchless and in front of the barrels on the. But
AJS.
they eventually, due to cost cutting and
Standardised.
badge engineering,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
standardised. And that wasn't a bad thing.
So the typical owner, I'm sorry if I'm butting in.
No, go on.
Typical owner. So when I rode the Beezer, the 250 Gold Star, I rode it and I thought, this is a perfect. In the UK, we call the 70s bikers in leather jackets and fringes, and what we call rockers, we used to call them greases.
Or grebos.
Grebos. And that 250, when I was riding it, I was thinking, this is a perfect starter grebo bike.
Yeah, it was a bit of a hooligan.
You could imagine, like long hair with a beard and the fringe leather jacket, riding that
And the
bike.
smell of the oil and the petrol took you back
Yeah.
50 years.
Well, the smell of the oil and the petrol and the bike, I don't even know if it was the oil and the petrol, just the smell coming off the bike made me think of when I was 14 and I was learning to ride on old Brit bikes with my mates.
Yeah, it's that smell. It's it.
And there's a certain smell, the other one didn't have it, but that one did. But the typical owner for the other one,
so the Matchless and AJS, so they were bread and butter.
Yeah.
Some might call them grey porridge bikes, some might, but they sold lots of them. In the UK primarily, they would be transport, ride to work,
Go to work.
reliable,
Yeah.
you know, easy to live with, economical, cheap to buy,
yeah,
and they did a rigid frame. So the S stands for spring, doesn't
or
it?
suspension,
And then
yeah.
if it didn't have if it had a rigid rear end, sprung saddle, that was still an option alongside the spring. And this is a clue to their usage, because that was considered by some people better for sidecar use.
Pub on the side. Yeah,
So
I
in
was
the
gonna say
50s
that.
in Britain, and before the Mini came along and cheap cars,
Yeah.
family transport, more often than not in a working class family, would be a sidecar and bolted to something like that.
Yeah. So for Rich
Would you
to
agree,
be,
Rich?
So for Rich
Yes,
to be
I would.
truly authentic, he should have a pair of waders
Yeah,
and a long ex-army coat,
yeah,
a pudding basin helmet,
yeah.
and a pipe.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of pictures, isn't there, of matchless riders off-road, which is a whole different avenue, smoking a pipe with a reversed cap. You know,
Reversed cap,
that's your sporting attitude on it.
Gauntlets
Yeah,
up to the...
And of course, you know, 40s and 50s, when the British bike industry was in its pomp, and you know, those were what everybody used
archetypal
and
bikes.
wanted.
Yeah,
The 350 and 500 matchlesses and AJSs and Nortons and Beezers, they were your everyday transport.
exactly. That's what I'm
But
saying. Yeah,
most of the Brit singles sold with 350s because you know, time of austerity, people on tight budgets,
Yeah,
they're a
maybe
lot
was
cheaper,
the
lower tax,
licensing.
more
Well,
economical.
we talk about austerity. There was a phrase in the UK. We don't want to turn this into a post-war history lesson because it's about the bikes, but they do reflect the history. Is a lot of the evolution, and it was a being kind, gentle evolution on the bikes, wasn't it? One year to the next, and there was evolution, as you've said. They changed the gearbox, they changed the push rods, became enclosed after your year. They had iron barrels and iron heads to start with because aluminium was so scarce and expensive in the UK.
After the,
And then they only adopted first a cylinder head, aluminium
yeah.
cylinder, way later when it became cheaper.
Yeah.
So it reflected the materials, and the same with the compression ratio. They started out something like 6-to-1 compression ratio because of what was called pool petrol, really low octane crap petrol. This is in the UK, and then I think they went to the dizzy heights of 7.5-to-1.
yeah, that's
What's
7.3 to 1.
all right,
that one.
7.3. I wasn't far off.
I mean, the other
yeah.
thing is, going back to those days, most of the Brit singles that people had were 350s. I think 9 out of 10 were 350s rather than 500 because they were a bit cheaper, more economical,
that was.
lower tax.
I read
so, yeah.
one article described yours, Rich, as the tearaway choice.
Blimey, there
Blimey,
you go.
yeah.
Well, that's me, isn't it?
Lock
Yeah.
up your daughters.
Yeah, that's you, Rich.
A key
Yeah.
thump.
Yeah.
So, riding them,
Yeah.
my riding impressions, and I'll do it on the video, but remarkably close in performance, but so much more torque on, as you'd expect, on the 500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the
And
AJS,
it was a much nicer ride. They both handled really well. I was surprised at the 250.
Yeah.
How
Oh well, I mean that was
Yeah.
competition-derived oil in
Yeah.
frame. You know, there's a lot of competition went into that. Motocross forks, Beezer motocross forks,
you can see
derived.
with different suspension on it, it could be a little bit of a weapon.
Oh yeah.
But the 500 is just it's a chuffing, lovely Sunday afternoon, chuffing along, and it makes this glorious sound when you open it up with a little bit of load on it. So in third gear, you open the throttle and you go. But you'll hear it on my video. But I went past some school kids and I intentionally did it, and you could hear them all like leaping in surprise.
They were probably
They're probably going, "Who's that stupid old man in the waders and the pipe?"
Yeah, given the parameters, and we all agreed, like top speed wise, quite similar actually, or quite close. But given those parameters, they couldn't be more different, could
No,
they? Within
no.
that, which was your point about including them both, Rich.
Yeah.
And you know, 7.3 to 1 compression versus, what did you say?
PSA is 10 to 1 compression.
And a
hot
much,
cam.
much softer cam.
Yeah.
And that's reflected in the exhaust notes, much gentler and frankly much nicer, isn't
It's
it?
a lovely
Yeah, it
ride,
is,
that
yeah.
500.
You know,
I'd love that bike.
The B25, when you open it, it's kind of
Yeah.
clack, clack, clack.
Go on then, Mike, I'll leave it to you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Trouble is, you're going to go before me.
I was going to say, I'm
what-
older than you and iller than you.
Let's not go there.
Seems,
I mean, the other
seems
point-
where we're sitting.
Yeah,
in
that's
a
right.
graveyard.
We are in a graveyard. Yeah.
But I mean, you'll
Coffin
get Mike's
dodgers.
riding impressions soon. But I think it's quite sad in a way because they were such a huge part of people's lives in the 40s and 50s, opposed wars. And now all these British singles, I mean, I don't know what the future holds for
But
them because.
that was something you wanted to talk about, wasn't
Yeah,
it? Like
because our demographic, we're
Yeah.
all getting too decrepit to start them,
and the price is getting
Or worse.
so cheap, isn't it?
Yeah.
now?
It is now, it's going the
Absolutely.
other way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Richard got it very cheap. As
Yeah.
those of you familiar with the channel know, Richard has got very short arms and very deep pockets, hasn't he? but he did get it for a bargain price. Needed a bit of fettling, but
yeah,
you know,
I mean, and a lot of these bikes, because they're not being used regularly, they will need fettling. I mean, that one hadn't run for a few years. The previous owner couldn't start it, and luckily it was nothing major, and I managed to get it running within 24 hours. And that was. I've had it 3 or 4 months, and to be fair, it still needs a little bit of fettling,
running
but we are
good,
getting there.
But I think it's
We're
also
getting
important to note that people who aren't familiar with, especially 50s and early 60s British singles, if you talk to someone about a British single, they're thinking Gold Star, Velocette, Thruxton, or something sporty, right? But your normal ride to work stuff was reliable. It was engineered to be reliable, and it was reliable. There's an article I read yesterday while I was swatting up doing my homework. Some of us do, Mike.
I know.
And there was a couple from Persia, a couple of guys who rode around the world on them.
Is that Iran?
Yeah, it is around now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
20,000 miles they did on those things.
Wow.
And I'm not saying they didn't have any problems, but they're renowned for being. And when you ride it, it isn't rattly or it doesn't jettison oil everywhere. It feels like you could ride it just slowly.
The
but
only
anyway.
the only thing that would hold you back from riding at any distance, or me from her, is the riding
Riding
position.
position, yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's like the bottom half is on a Harley Fat Boy.
It
and
is
the, and the
almost.
top half is you're on.
It's quite sporty. It's like flat bars
and-
actually slightly
and
downward.
what did you describe it? Sack of spuds.
It's a classic British sack of spuds riding position. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even 60s and 70s Triumphs have it to a degree. You've got
Yeah.
your feet relatively far forward, but they're almost, like you say, they're almost highway pegs
Yeah.
on that, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
far off.
Yeah.
Crazy. But you get used to it. Like
and we
all these
could
things.
tweak the handlebar
Yeah,
position
yeah,
a bit.
yeah. But it is charming. It is really charming. I wouldn't describe the B25 as charming.
No, it isn't.
It's too much of a terrier of a bike.
Well, it's a Grebo. It's a
Yeah.
trainee Grebo. bike.
Trainee Grebo. So one's a trainee Grebo and one's a ride to
Pipe
work
and
with you.
slippers.
Doesn't go fast enough to put your pipe out.
So what does that tell us about the rich?
Well, I know, God, guilty as charged. Yeah.
But I'll confess, because you've already said, you'd love sorry, Rich, not Matchless, AJS, and you wouldn't fit on the B25,
No,
right? It's too
no.
small for you, and they are tiny.
Yeah.
I mean, considering they made the B50, the 500, and it was physically exactly the same, apart from the bigger barrel, tiny. I'd be tempted by a B50. I don't think I'd be tempted by a B25 because it's all the kind of harshness without the ultimate performance, But the Matchless, I could see myself. But so they're very gentle bikes, but they're lovely.
They are the
So I'd go for the AJS.
with the
as well.
greatest respect, Rich, the Gold Star feels a bit grenadish.
Yeah.
I was scared of
Yeah.
winding it on.
And of course, back in the day, they had that reputation
Yeah, yeah.
because 17-year-old learner riders didn't have
Oh,
any
well,
mechanical
and
sympathy,
training
didn't
Grebos,
warm
yeah.
them up, and were trying to get
Yeah,
that
and-
80, 85 mile an hour catalogue performance out
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
when
And
I
the Conrods aren't the toughest in the world.
when I was reading, this is something I was thinking about when I was riding the AJS, and I was thinking back to those 1920s bikes we rode with Phil and the guys.
Yeah.
I haven't ridden a lot of bikes between those and 1950s bikes. The earliest bikes that I've ridden really are 1959-ish up to modern day. you could feel a tangible link between
yeah.
those
absolutely.
between those singles of Phil and all the guys, their bikes, and that AJS.
Yeah,
you could see the
definitely.
lineage.
Yeah, and you can feel it.
And you could feel that.
Yeah. I mean, it's only a half step away from hand gear changes and all that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note, to the point about ride to work bikes that it exemplifies. The other thing that did for them, apart from cheap cars like in this country, the Mini particularly kind of killed the ride to work and certainly killed the sidecar, and those went with it. The other thing that killed it, of course, was the Triumph Twin. Changed everything. So twin cylinders came along. They had way more performance. They didn't cost a lot more to make, especially if they were clever the way you made them, like Triumph were. Everyone else copied them, including AJS and Matchless, and it kind of sidelined the singles. So it wasn't just cheap cars, and it wasn't just, and it was. What the twins reflected was it was less about riding to work, and it was more about riding to the coast with your mates, or riding to recreational use. And obviously America reflected that as the major market for them.
And a single like that wouldn't keep up.
Yeah, but to your point, Rich, about now where does an old British single fit? Where, be it an AJS Matchless, be it a Biza B33, be it a Royal Enfield Bullet, ES2, huge number to choose from. They're all reasonably well engineered. They were all nicely made because they had to be. I think now that you've got exactly the right bike for just chuffing around the lanes. You notice things that you don't notice when you're going a little bit quicker.
Smells.
Yeah. I ride my Triumph Twins, which aren't a lot newer, or the one isn't, a hell of a lot quicker than I ride that. That's great, and I enjoy it. But that gives you a whole different dimension.
It's a different experience. It's nice to have both. I mean, funnily, I seem to have gravitated towards singles in my bike collection. All my bikes bar one, so that's 6 out of 7 are single cylinder.
Mind you, you are self-confessed Captain Slow now, aren't you?
Well, I am, but there's something pure and simple and lovely about a single cylinder.
There is. I've always liked a single, but in terms of the Captain Slow thing, we're all Captain Slow with digital flipping speed, like average speed cameras, and
you have to be a Captain Slow now.
You can't. Don't shake your head.
Or you'll lose your license otherwise.
Yeah, you're mad. You are.
Yeah.
Crazy. But no, it was a nice counterpoint, and I think you're dead right, Rich, in terms of they're very different given the similarities in performance. Very, very different physically, to ride, to handle, torque, everything. And given a choice, I'd go with the AJS.
So would I. If you could only keep one of those two, what would you keep?
Oh, undoubtedly the AJS.
There we go.
There you go. All right, and with that,
before we
here we go.
Here we go.
I'll try and wind it up.
I know.
He comes in with a but. Yeah, go on.
No, talking about what a huge part of Britain's industrial heritage those old motorbikes are, it would be sad if they die a death, and so people have got to go and buy them, and you can buy them at very modest prices now and use them, and they're really enjoyable.
Give them to your
We've
kids.
all enjoyed them, haven't we?
Yeah. Keep them, cherish them, hand them over,
and use them.
Use them.
Yeah.
Teach your kids to have a chuff round on them.
Yeah. There we go.
And they may still be watching our channel.
When
we're here.
That's philosophical.
Pushing up daisies. Right, well, thank you all.
All right.
Ride safe.
On that bright point.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. See you soon.
Back to the studio.
See you now. Take care.